Good morning, this is Shelby Law with the Great Basin Fire Potential Briefing for Saturday, October 5th, 2024. Fire potential impacts for the next few days are shown here. Today we're expecting gusty winds again over western Wyoming and across much of northern and northeast Utah. These are west-northwest winds behind the front with minimum relative humidities between 20 to 25% and gusts up to 40 plus miles an hour possible, with lighter winds expected by this afternoon over the rest of the area. Winds pick up again over the central Idaho Mountains tomorrow with gusts 20 to 30 miles per hour and minimum relative humidity is back down into the upper teens, and then those gusts continue on Monday as well, although they might be a little bit lighter. We'll also continue to see above average temperatures across the region, slightly cooler temperatures today, but those will be increasing over the next coming days. No precipitation or lightning to speak of yesterday. Yesterday was a very active day for our large fires. We had 10 new fires for over 4,000 acres, and reported large fire growth was 3,300 acres or so, but we know that number is low as many of our fires in Idaho, Wyoming, and northern Utah saw quite a bit of growth yesterday with the winds. Observed precipitation for the past 7 days is shown here on the left. Not really much to speak of in the last 7 days, and the last 14 days percent of normal shows the area as much below normal for the time of year. In fact, very little precip at all, when normally we would have seen a few fall storms bringing significant precipitation to the area. These dry conditions are reflected in our ERCs across much of the area. For Utah up into western Wyoming, we're seeing values above the 80th and 90th percentile, and a few stations are even recording above the 97th percentile. The central Idaho Mountains are also seeing fairly high values, and along the Sierra front. A closer look at some of these areas in central Idaho, we can see those values are quite a bit above normal for the time of year, and these green values here showing the trajectory over the next 7 days. We do see these values leveling out with the weather forecast, but we will be close to historical records for the time of year in the next 7 days, and that is the case for pretty much every area in the Great Basin. In the next 7 days, we'll be hitting some historical records. This morning's satellite imagery is showing that trough having moved off to the north and east pretty quickly, with some ridging building back into the Great Basin, but behind that trough we will expect to see those winds continuing over western Wyoming and northeast Utah today. For smoke impacts this afternoon, given the increased activity on their fires yesterday, we can expect smoke to have increased over what we've seen previously this week today over Idaho, Wyoming, and Utah, and then those smoke impacts will continue tomorrow as we see the westerly winds pick up a bit as well over the central Idaho Mountains. Again, for this afternoon, ridge building into the Great Basin for warming temperatures once again. We do have high risk issued for the winds in western Wyoming and northern and northeast Utah for those very strong west to northwest winds. Closer look at those winds again for this afternoon, showing gusty values west to northwest over western Wyoming and northeast Utah. Minimum relative humidities are in the mid-teens for Nevada. We're also seeing some low values across the central Idaho Mountains, and maybe slightly higher values in the northern Utah mountains. With we're seeing those values around 20% or so. On Sunday, more of the same, warming and drying area-wide. There is a little shortwave feature that moves through the flow around the ridge that will increase winds over the central Idaho Mountains and western Wyoming tomorrow, with continued warm and dry conditions. Again, those gusts will be upwards of 25 to 30 miles an hour over the central Idaho Mountains and western Wyoming. Minimum relative humidities are staying low across the area, and maybe even just around 20 to 22% over the central Idaho Mountains. On Monday, ridge continues across the Great Basin. There is a little low that develops off the California coast that may allow a little bit of moisture into mainly Utah and Nevada for some cloud cover. Not really looking for any precipitation out of this moisture, but could see a very isolated storm here or there, and again, an increase in cloud cover. Gusty winds still continuing over the central Idaho Mountains and western Wyoming on Monday again, and maybe even seeing some winds pick up along the Sierra front. Minimum relative humidities don't change much throughout the week as we're expecting the air mass to just remain on the drier side. Maximum temperatures on Saturday have come down a bit today from yesterday's highs with the passage of that cool front with highs in the mid 70s. Still very warm over Utah and Nevada. By Saturday, with the ridge building back in, temperatures increase once again to the low to mid 80s across the north, and continued warm temperatures across the south as well. 3-day precipitation totals are shown here. This is showing nothing in terms of precipitation across the entire western U.S. for the next 3 days. As we go into Tuesday, again, a little bit of moisture in place in the southern half of the Great Basin, allowing some cloud cover to continue over Utah. We may see a little bit of precipitation in the northeast Utah mountains, but still very minimal and not any kind of significant precip at all. More warm and dry weather on Wednesday across the area. On Thursday, we see the next trough developing over the Pacific Northwest. This will increase winds across mainly Utah and Nevada out of the southwest and keeping things warm across the south as well. That trough, current models are having this trough move through the Great Basin, northern Great Basin on Friday. We could see some precipitation coming to the northern portions of the area as early as Friday, but again, there's not a lot of confidence yet in where this system is going to be going. So stay tuned. It does look like something will be moving into the Great Basin this weekend, bringing some precipitation somewhere. We'll be keeping a close eye on it. 7-day precip totals are shown here. Really not looking for anything significant just yet. A little bit of precip coming in here and there, mainly to Utah, but we'll be keeping an eye on this forecast for the bulk of the work week. Expect warm and dry conditions. The extended forecast for October 12th through the 18th keeps things very warm across the entire western and central U.S. with the bullseye over the northern Rockies and below normal precipitation as well over mainly the northern 2/3 of the Great Basin. So there is still no significant relief in sight to these very far outside climatological conditions right now for the beginning to middle of October. This concludes today's fire potential briefing. Please check back tomorrow for the latest updates.